You gave your all and still, they forgot you. That's the cruel twist, isn't it? The bitter punchline you never saw coming. You bled for them. You smiled through the ache. You swallowed your truth just to keep their comfort untouched. You made them your world, while to them, you were just a placeholder, a temporary convenience. And now you sit there, replaying the past, wondering what went wrong. But here's what no one dares to say. Nothing went wrong. You were simply too real in a world addicted to pretending. Too loyal in a time where betrayal trends. You gave them honesty, raw, unfiltered, inconvenient honesty, and they called it too much. They claimed they wanted someone real, but when you showed up, they choked on the truth. Because people don't crave depth, they crave distraction. They want dopamine, not devotion. Convenience, not commitment. And you were never convenient. You were a mirror, and mirrors scare cowards. It's not that you weren't enough. It's that you were too much. Too much presence, too much intensity, too much love. You made them feel seen, and that terrified them. You made them face their own emptiness, and they weren't ready. So they blamed you. They flipped the script, turned you into the villain, and walked away like you never mattered. They ghosted you, replaced you with noise. But no, they didn't forget you. You became too painful to remember. You turned into the guilt they buried, the memory they silenced with laughter that's just a little too loud. But guilt is a clever ghost. It haunts their tired eyes, their fading smiles, the hush that follows your name. You weren't forgotten, you were suppressed. And let's be honest, your value isn't measured by whether they remember. Silence speaks loudest when it's earned. Your presence was a storm, your absence, an earthquake. The moment you left, everything shifted. You just couldn't see it. They laughed louder, posted more, partied harder. But that's the noise people make when they're trying to drown out the damage. That's the chaos they create when they can't face what they destroyed. You became the lesson they weren't ready to learn. The test they failed and will keep failing. Because someone like you doesn't come twice. You were the blessing they mistook for background noise. And now, you're the standard they'll never touch again. So don't go crawling back. Don't shrink just to fit into spaces that couldn't hold your power. Your mistake wasn't that you gave, it's that you gave to the wrong ones. Now is the time to give to yourself. Feed your silence, sharpen your pain. Let it sculpt you into something unshakable. This world doesn't deserve your softness if all it sees is weakness. Let them meet the version of you that doesn't ask, doesn't beg, doesn't wait. Let them taste the consequences of their choices, because you were a gift, and they treated you like noise. Now become the silence that echoes louder than any scream. They say, if they wanted to, they would, and they didn't. That's what stings. Not just the betrayal, not just the absence, but how easy it was for them to move on. How effortlessly they closed your chapter. But here's the truth. They didn't move on. They escaped. And there's a difference. No one moves on from something real. They run from it. They mask it with distractions. They cover the cracks with fake smiles. But deep down, they know what they lost. You think they're happy? No, they're just occupied, distracted. You think they're glowing? That's just the mask. Behind it, regret, bitterness, emptiness. They thought they'd find better, but better doesn't come in copies. You were the original, and they shattered it. Don't wait for an apology that will never come. People don't say sorry when pride blinds them. They'll call you too much because they were too little, too weak to handle someone who actually cared. That's the curse of being real. You love deeply. You stay loyal. You fight for people who wouldn't flinch for you. And in the end, you're left with echoes. But remember, those echoes, that silence, that's where your power begins. When the noise fades and all that's left is you, that's where the transformation starts. That's when you rise, when you build, when you become someone untouchable. Don't ever believe you lost. They lost you, and they'll realize it in the silence, in the chaos, in the moments they need you the most. And you're no longer there. You were their shelter, their calm in the storm. And now they're left dancing in the rain, pretending they don't miss the warmth. Let them. Let them drown in their delusions. Meanwhile, you rise, not to get them back, not to make them regret, but because staying the same would mean they still have power over you, and they don't, not anymore. You gave everything, and they forgot you. Good. Now give everything to yourself, and watch how unforgettable you become. You see, real betrayal doesn't always come in loud words. It often arrives in stillness, in the quiet choice not to care when it was finally your turn to fall. And that kind of pain, it doesn't destroy you. It forges you into something unrecognizable, something fierce. It teaches you never to beg for presence again, never to build a home in someone's soul when they leave you homeless without blinking. You thought your love could save them. You believed your loyalty would be enough. But this world, it devours soft hearts and calls it mercy. You were raised to believe that kindness would be rewarded, that if you stayed honest, stayed loving, the universe would come through. But that's the cruelest joke of all. Sometimes goodness gets you nothing but overlooked. Sometimes being the strong one means no one ever checks if you're okay. And sometimes the ones you die for will treat you like an afterthought. But don't let that harden your heart with bitterness. Let it refine you. Let it make you wiser with your energy, kinder to yourself. You weren't weak. You weren't naive. You just loved deeply in a world that fears anything real. They used your silence against you, twisted it into indifference. But silence is where warriors are born. While they fake smiles and pretend to have healed, you're in the shadows, rebuilding, relentlessly. And when you rise, it won't be to get revenge. It'll be to outgrow, to outshine. You'll become the ghost of what they couldn't handle, the lesson they'll never escape. They'll feel your presence in every genuine person they push away, in every lonely night filled with what-ifs. That's what happens when someone breaks someone real. You never forget the warmth, even while shivering beside someone new. And yes, they'll try to come back. They always do. When the excitement dies, when the truth slaps them in the face, they'll remember how you stayed, how you never judged, how your love made them feel safe. But don't let them back in. You're not a rehab center for broken souls who smashed your sanctuary. You're not their second chance. You're a fortress now, silent, evolved, unshakable. They forgot you? Good. That was the beginning of your becoming. People only value what they can't replace once it's gone. They had you, and they treated you like background noise in a crowded room. Always there, never heard. And now they scroll through lifeless conversations, shallow friendships, empty "are you okays?" from people who would never bleed for them, and finally realize your love wasn't ordinary. But by then, you're already changed. Not cold, not cruel, just unavailable. And nothing burns more than being ignored by the same soul you once leaned on. You've become everything they'll search for but never find. Because you didn't love out of convenience. You didn't stay because it was easy. You stayed through storms. You stayed through silence, through pain. But they mistook that loyalty for weakness. That chapter's closed now. The version of you that begged, gone. The one who waited, buried. The one who poured endlessly into empty cups, dead. Now you give wisely. Now you stay only where you're met equally. You learn the hardest lesson of all. Not everyone deserves access to your heart. Some people only show up to take. They come with masks and empty hands, hoping you'll fill the void they're too scared to face. But you're not their savior. You're not a pit stop for people running from themselves. You're a wildfire. And you no longer keep people warm who bring nothing but cold. So you stop explaining. You stop proving your worth. You stop breaking yourself to be seen. Let them go. Let them lie. Let them convince the world you didn't matter. Because while they live in delusions, you're becoming the kind of person who doesn't ask for permission to be powerful. And don't confuse healing with pretending it didn't hurt. No, feel it. Let it burn. Let it rip through you. Because that pain, that's honesty. That's the forge. Healing doesn't mean you smile through lies. It means you stop swallowing your truth. You stop shrinking to keep others comfortable. You're not here to be soft-spoken. You're here to be real. And real is unforgettable. That's why they ran. That's why they replaced you. That's why they erased your name from their story. Because remembering you would mean confronting the part of themselves they were too scared to fix. But you're done waiting. You're done hoping they'll wake up. Done pouring into desserts. From now on, your silence will say what your presence never could. And when they finally realize what they lost, when they hear your love echo in their empty nights, it won't be your concern anymore. They'll be greeted not by the version of you who once waited with open arms, but by a ghost. A silence they created. They thought you'd always answer, always stay, always accept the crumbs. And for a while you did, because that's what love does. It hopes, it bleeds. Belief can hold on, but eventually when it's betrayed too many times, it fades into silence. That's what they never anticipated. The silence. They expected you to chase, to argue, to defend yourself, but you didn't. You quietly disappeared, fully. And that silence, it's louder than anything you ever shouted. It echoes in their mind, haunting the very spaces where your name used to bring comfort. Because when you stopped speaking, they were left with no one else to blame. No more excuses, no more drama, just the raw truth staring them down. They lost someone who genuinely cared, and they'll try to twist the narrative, make it sound like you changed, like you were the one who turned cold. But let's be honest. People only call you cold when they can no longer manipulate your warmth. You didn't change. You evolved. You grew tired. You woke up. You stopped showing up for those who never cared to check if you were breathing. And that's not coldness. That's survival. That's self-respect. That's what happens when a soul gets exhausted from carrying everyone while silently drowning. You weren't just a shoulder to lean on. They relied on your entire existence. But the moment you needed a hand, they were gone, vanished, suddenly too busy, too distant. You learn the hard way that not everyone who says, "I'm here for you," actually means it. Some people only show up when the lights are on, when things are easy, when you're useful. But the second things get dark, they vanish. And that's okay. Let them. Now you're building in silence, creating without applause. You're healing in places they'll never see. You're doing the most dangerous thing a broken soul can do, coming back whole. And the next time they look for the version of you that tolerated their nonsense, it won't be there. Replaced by someone colder, wiser, unshakable. Someone who doesn't chase, doesn't beg, doesn't explain. Someone who no longer romanticizes pain. You were never meant to stay broken just to make others comfortable. You weren't meant to live in emotional poverty while feeding everyone else. That's done now. From this moment forward, your energy is precious, your time is invaluable, your peace is non-negotiable. You gave everything and they forgot you, but now they'll remember the price of having access to you. And it's not just them, it's the whole world that underestimated you, laughed at your dreams, doubted your strength, took your kindness as a weakness to exploit. But you're dangerous now, because you've been to rock bottom. You've tasted loneliness. You've stared into the dark long enough to become the shadow. And from that place, you built something real. A fire they can't touch. A silence they can't decode. A presence they can't replace. That's what happens when you stop waiting. When you stop hoping they'll change. You become the change. You become the storm, the standard. And they'll feel it every time their fake world crumbles. Because real doesn't go out of style. It just becomes rare. And here's what they'll never admit out loud. Even if they laughed when you walked away, even if they pretended you meant nothing, even if they crafted the perfect narrative to make themselves the victim, they still check. They lurk in silence, scrolling through your life like a thief in the night, looking for cracks, hoping you're still stuck, praying you haven't moved on. Because deep down, they know. They know you were the realest thing they ever had. Not the loudest, not the flashiest, but the most solid. The one who stayed, the one who cared when it wasn't trendy. And that truth eats them alive. They'll never show it. Pride won't let them. But every win you collect, every silent step forward, every glow up they weren't invited to, it burns them. Not because they hate you, but because they hate what they lost. They realize no matter how far they run, they'll never be remembered like you. You weren't just another name in their phone. You were the one who answered when no one else did. The one who saw through the silences, who stayed up when you had nothing to gain, who gave when your own cup was empty. And they let that slip through their fingers, chasing noise, chasing hype, chasing temporary highs. Now they sit in rooms full of people who don't know their demons, people who don't know how to love them without a mask. But you did, and that's the part they can't escape. That's the part that follows them into new relationships, into empty conversations, into those nights when the silence feels like it's screaming. You're the standard now, the one they compare everyone to. And no matter how many times they try to pretend otherwise, they feel your absence. Because you weren't just present, you were real. And that kind of love, it doesn't fade. It scars. But enough about them. This is about you, about the fire they tried to snuff out, the light they tried to dim. And look at you now, still standing. Bruised, sure. Changed, absolutely. But stand. You showed up with nothing but loyalty, gave your all to prove you'd never leave, even when it seemed like no one else would. But how did they repay you? They vanished when you needed them most. They disappeared when your hands were trembling, when your voice cracked, asking for the same love you gave them so effortlessly. And in that moment, you sat there questioning yourself, wondering if you were too much, not enough, or just not the kind of person people hold on to. But let me be clear, it's not your fault. It's not your responsibility to shrink yourself just so someone else can feel big. You weren't too much. You were just too real for people who live pretending. And here's the twist in that tragedy. What broke you, built you. Every betrayal, every lie, every time you were left unseen, taught you something vital. It taught you that your energy is a currency and not everyone can afford it. It taught you that your heart is sacred and not everyone deserves access. It taught you that your silence is power. You see, when you were loud with your love, they ignored it. But now that you're quiet, now that you've vanished, they feel it in every breath. Because real ones don't make noise when they leave. They simply don't return. That's where you are now. You're not coming back. Not to the same patterns, not to the same people, and certainly not to the same pain. You're gone, and your absence is louder than any "I miss you" they never said. It's louder than every thank you they should have whispered when you were holding them up with bloody hands. Let them sit with that. Let them feel what it's like to lose someone who never came from a place of ego, but from love. Pure, unconditional love. The kind the world pretends to crave, but runs from the second it becomes uncomfortable. And don't let anyone make you feel guilty for walking away. You didn't walk because you gave up. You walked because you finally saw the truth. You saw that the same people who begged for your light were the ones who tried to dim it. You saw that your loyalty was being spent places where loyalty didn't exist. You saw that holding on was suffocating the parts of you that once bloomed. So for once, you chose yourself. You chose peace over chaos, clarity over confusion, and healing over history. And yes, it hurts. Healing always does. Growth always does. But what's on the other side? That's where your true power lives. That's where the version of you they tried to bury rises again, sharper, colder, smarter. The one who no longer settles, the one who no longer hands out chances like candy. The one who realizes not everyone deserves a seat at your table just because they were there when you were starving. You gave everything and they forgot. Let that be their curse. Let that be their nightmare. But you move in silence now. You grow like roots. You show the world what happens when a storm learns to calm itself, when a warrior learns to rebuild in the dark. Now you don't speak to be understood. You speak to remind yourself of your strength. You no longer chase closure. You create distance. You don't need revenge, validation, or recognition. You are your own proof, your own witness, your own miracle. And if they come back, if they knock again, don't even open the door. Let them hear the echo of your peace. Let them realize they didn't just lose you. They lost access to a whole universe built from pain, love, and fire. A universe that now belongs to you, and you alone. The ones who hurt you the most, they never really thought you'd leave. They gambled with your soul because they thought you were too loyal to walk, too soft to disappear, too in love to stop bleeding for them. They mistook your patience for weakness, your forgiveness for permission. They believed you'd always be there, arms open, heart exposed, ready to catch them when life knocked them down. But when you finally chose silence over begging, when you stopped explaining yourself, when you stopped fighting for a place in their life, that's when the panic set in. Not because they loved you, but because they lost control. They lost access. They lost the power to play with someone who actually cared deeply, someone who loved them dangerously. And now they're surrounded by people who smile wide but won't stay when it matters. And they feel that difference in their bones. But don't mistake their regret for love. Regret comes when comfort dies, when the games no longer work, when they realize you were the one thing in their life that wasn't pretending. You were the only one who gave without keeping score, who stayed without a reason, who loved without contracts or expectations. And they threw that away for what? For attention? For convenience? For something that sparkled louder but never lasted? Let them choke on that decision. Let them wear it like a scar on their pride. The truth is, they never really deserved you in the first place. You just didn't know your worth back then. You've become everything they feared, the version of yourself that no longer needs them to feel whole. That's the true form of revenge. That's the masterpiece you've created, painted with the residue of all the apologies you'll never hear. You were the real one in a world full of pretenders, and now the spotlight belongs to you. Let them sit in the audience, watching from the sidelines, wondering what could have been, while you shine in the silence they never respected. They'll say you changed. Let them. That's the story they'll run with, the excuse they'll cling to so they don't have to face the truth. Yes, you've changed, and damn right you should have. Change wasn't a choice, it was a survival instinct. You couldn't stay soft in a world that rewards indifference. You couldn't stay loyal to people who fed off your silence. You couldn't keep giving pieces of yourself to people who only took, never held. So yes, you changed. You stopped explaining your worth. You stopped waiting for apologies from those who never had the courage to own their betrayals. You stopped tolerating being only half loved, half heard, and half respected. And in the process, you became everything they feared. The person who no longer needs their validation to breathe. And that, my friend, is exactly why they hate it. Not because they wish you hadn't grown, but because your growth exposes the truth they'll never admit. They were the problem all along. You were their mirror, and mirrors aren't kind to those who lie. You reflected their neglect, their cowardice, their inability to love anything they couldn't control. And when you stopped shrinking, when you stopped pretending you were okay with the crumbs they offered, that's when they labeled you the villain. Because it's easier for them to hide behind that label than admit they destroyed something beautiful, something rare, something they'll never find again. They'll say you were too much, too sensitive, too emotional. But what they won't say is that you were the one who listened when no one else did. You were the one who showed up when everyone else walked out. You carried burdens that weren't yours, and still, you tried to make them feel safe. They'll twist the story to protect their ego. Let them. The truth doesn't need defending, it echoes. And with time, those echoes get louder. In their quiet moments, in their fake laughs, in the empty connections they'll build, they'll hear it. They'll realize painfully that nobody else will love them like you did. Others might touch their skin, but they won't touch their soul. Others will say the right things, but they won't stay when the darkness comes. Others will entertain them, distract them, pacify them, but they won't understand them the way you did. They won't hold space for their wounds, see past the mask they wear, and recognize the raw, aching truth underneath. That kind of connection doesn't happen twice. You were lightning, rare, unforgettable, intense, and they tried to trap you in something as temporary as plastic. Now they're left with mere flickers, short-lived highs that fade by the morning. And the silence you left behind, it wraps around them like smoke, a constant reminder of everything they lost and will never touch again. But you're done mourning what was never meant to be yours forever. You've buried the past, not out of hate, but out of respect for yourself. You've learned to love from a distance, to let people go without needing closure. You've healed in silence, without needing to prove anything to anyone, because healing isn't loud. Growth doesn't seek attention. Real transformation happens in the shadows, in the moments when you choose peace over revenge, evolution over reaction. And now you don't flinch when you hear their name. You don't ache when you see their face. You feel nothing. Because you finally realize that forgetting you wasn't their victory, it was their loss. A loss so deep, they'll never stop feeling it, even if they never speak a word about it. And you just keep building, keep rising, keep becoming the kind of soul that doesn't beg to be remembered, but is impossible to forget.